What's going on, everybody? Thank you so much for joining me here on episode 18 of the 90 Feet from Home Fantasy Baseball Podcast, presented to you by Underdog Fantasy. I am your host, Joe Orico. You guys can check me out over on Twitter at Joe Orico99, posting a ton of stuff over there, podcasts, articles, all that great stuff. Go check it out. But we have bigger fish to fry today because Nick Pollack is in the house. Our good friend Nick Pollack from PitcherList is here to talk with us about some disappointing starting pitchers, some guys that maybe have not lived up to our early season expectations. Nick, it's great to get you on the new show. It's been far too long. How you been, man?
Hey, how you doing, Joe? It's great to be here, and yeah, you look well. It's good to talk to you. Exciting to talk about some hope for some of these guys.
Let's try and bring some hope to the people, because I know that here in Toronto, anyway, as a Blue Jay fan, there's not a lot of hope, but hopefully we can spread some of that good cheer today. Maybe some of these guys are going to come back. Maybe some of them are not, but we're going to talk through all that with Nick. You need to be checking him out over at PitcherList. PitcherList on Twitter. He is Mr. PitcherList, but he's going to tell you everything that's going on there at PitcherList. Nick, what's new at the site?
Oh man, there's a ton of stuff. We have a lot of exciting things that we're working on for 2025, including we're working on mobile app and something we're calling the Pro Dashboard. So that's absurdly cool. We're gonna have crossing my fingers betas by the end of this year. So those of you guys who are in the PL Plus Discord, we'll be able to test around that stuff and give us some feedback, which is super fun. But overall, just go to our player pages. We've already revamped them some more. We've improved our game log, where now it's super quick. You can go between different pitches super effectively. We added more information inside of our advanced detail section, so you can see you click on any game and click and expands, and you see all the data you want individually by game that you can't find anywhere else. So that's a lot of information I just put out there. I don't know. I hate plugging stuff. Just go to our player pages if you haven't yet. Have fun with the game log. It's great.
They're fantastic. I love the percentiles. Those are really a huge thing for me.
Yes.
I love it. I'm a
100%.
sucker for a percentile.
Well, yeah.
The PitcherList player pages are gorgeous. You guys should be checking it out. Keeping up with everything that Nick's doing. He's talking about pitching constantly. The SP Roundup is a must read every single day. Just fantastic work. Make sure you're following him at PitcherList over on Twitter. Before we get going, like I mentioned, we are brought to you by Underdog, and there's a cool new special that is available right now. It's called Pick 8. It's live for the NBA Finals. You create entries with up to 8 picks, and Underdog will automatically double flex your entry. So you can miss a couple picks and still end up winning the game. With more picks to make and extra ways to win, the excitement is higher than ever. And the best part, you can win up to 325 times your original amount. If you use my code Joe99, you get a special pick and a deposit bonus up to $250 in cash for your first time deposit. Nick, let's get into it, and let's start off with Pablo Lopez. I was pretty high on him coming into the year. I think you were fairly high on him as well.
Oh, yeah.
The thing that is crazy here is when you look at the numbers and you leave out ERA, he's almost looking better than last year, just as good anyway. There's nothing here to suggest he's much different. He's given up a lot of home runs, though. 1.61 homer per 9 is quite a bit higher than what we usually see from him. Is that the problem? Is there something else here? I expect him to turn things around, but what's your level of concern with Lopez, if there is any?
Well, whenever you see ERA being the weird one, it's always going to be home runs, right?
Yeah.
Or you can even point to left on base percentage, which also is underneath 70%. And anytime you see under 70%, it should lift an eyebrow, especially considering that those that are the elites actually are going to have a better left on base percentage than others, just because they don't allow as many hits and fewer opportunities to allow those guys to score. And that's how they are the elites. When it comes to Pablo Lopez, he just hasn't had the changeup, really. I mean, the sweeper's also getting hit a lot harder. The ICR rates on his sweeper are much higher this season. Last year, we had a mark of about 28% ICR for Pablo Lopez's sweeper, and it's closer to 34%, which is actually improved over the past couple of weeks, but it's still a problem that he needs to address, while the changeup just hasn't gone the same O swing. It was a 42% O swing last year for Pablo Lopez's changeup. Now it's down to 37%. And we see fewer strikes as well, 5 ticks lower, down to 61%. It's just not the same pitch that it was. It's not as dependable for him. It's still creating weak contact. He's just not getting the whiffs. It's 12% swing strike rate on Pablo Lopez's changeup, which has routinely been 18% plus. So I think over time he figures this out. Like, if you want to think about Pablo Lopez, what is the one thing he's always had? It's the changeup. Like, that's going to come back. So when that happens, I imagine the home runs will also dissipate a bit, just because they don't get the chance to just sit on four seamers as much as they used to. So don't worry too much about Pablo Lopez. At least you get strikeouts still. At least you get good win opportunities. Still has 5 wins, which is honestly pretty good at this point in the season. And yeah, the home runs will come down, and we've seen this before. He's had like 4 or 5 ERAs in the past, and he's brought those down to like a 3.7, 3.6 ERA by the end. So we're cool.
He's won almost half of his starts. I think it's about as much as you can hope for in this day and age. The walk rate's gone down. There's nothing really that I'm that worried about here. I think he's a prime buy low candidate. And I see people every day. I think it's like Chris Towers. People tweeted him and say, "We told you about Pablo Lopez. He stinks." He doesn't stink. He's still very, very much a top 10 SP for me. Is he? I haven't looked at the most recent list, Nick. He's still in the top 10 for you?
Oh no, he hasn't been for a while.
No.
He's been I had to remove the Ace is gonna ace label from him. Not for a while. It was actually like a week and a half ago.
Okay.
After that one, I brought him underneath the threshold of being an ace. Last start was good. It's a big test today, actually, against the Yankees. We're recording this on Wednesday around midday. So I'm really curious to see how that plays out for Pablo Lopez. If he's able to get over that hump and showcase the changeup, we can be in talks of getting that ace is going to ace tag back.
A couple guys we're talking about are actually going to be pitching today, which always makes it a little bit tricky depending on when you're listening. You might listen right after.
I'm an honest man at where it is right now, and hopefully I can tell you what you should look for. That would make them good.
Whatever happens today, the analysis stands, because whatever happens on any given start should not change your view of a pitcher unless they're drastically down in velocity or something. But usually, one start is not something to read too much into. Let's talk about my boy, Kevin Gausman. You've been, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, have you been a little bit lower on Gausman than consensus the last couple of years? You worry about the splitter from what I recall and the inconsistencies.
Not just a splitter. I mean, being a 1-2 guy with splitters can be worrisome. I would say that Gausman's actually is one of the better ones in the game.
Yeah.
It's actually more the fact that the four-seamer consistently allows high ICR rates, high BABIPs. It just gets hit. And we see the high whip every year. 116, 124, I believe the other ones were. Maybe it was actually 118 last year. It was 124 before that. We saw the high BABIPs. We go, oh, these need to come down. Well, if you have that kind of fastball and it's always hit that hard and there's nothing else, you're going to continue to allow those hits. The question, though, is, all right, fine, you have a 118 whip or so. If you give me 200 strikeouts and 15 wins and a good ERA, that's okay. We can take that. However, what's happened this year is that the splitter's gone worse, where the swing strike rate's gone way down. Yeah. You can't be a 15, 16% swing strike rate splitter. That needs to be a 22% plus. Why? Because if that's not threatening, if guys aren't feeling like they're going to whiff on that, then they're going to go after the fastball more. And then the problem really shows up. So it's an issue with Gausman. He did get a little unlucky with the Orioles. I mean, that home run from Santander, for example, was just ridiculous. That was way out of the zone upstairs in Santander. I don't know how he got to that. But yeah, Gausman kind of is what he is at this point. And I think moving forward, we should just accept that he is a 120 whip guy. The question is, how many home runs is he going to allow? How many strikeouts is he ultimately going to get if the splitter isn't what he used to be? I think it will come back and be a pretty dang good pitch.
I think it will too. I've given him this leeway because he didn't start the year on time and there was the shoulder fatigue and a couple of problems there. He didn't really have spring training, but we're kind of exiting the point where that's a valid excuse now that he's made, 12 starts this year. There are things that I like and things that I really don't like. I mean, if you look at the ERA estimators, they're still pretty good. But like you mentioned, that swinging strike rate is down across the board. And something that's interesting with the BABIP, I'm usually a regression to the mean guy when you're seeing massive outliers. But Gausman every year in Toronto has allowed a very high BABIP. And I think part of that as well is the turf. The turf is going to have some.
It could be. Yeah, that's certainly something that does affect it. But at the same time, it's like the actual numbers on the pitches themselves, not even like the results, just it has a high ICR. It gets crushed. And that's not gonna, I don't know, it's not gonna end well. So I mean, it's like, look, Gausman, just don't treat him necessarily like an ace anymore. Just treat him like he's I don't know, like 25 or so, something like that, 30. Like you're going to still get production on the whip side. Oh, not the whip side. I'm sorry. You should on the ERA side, the win side, and the strikeout side.
Yeah, I'm hoping that strikeout rate gets up because right now we're looking at about league average, and he's been like a 30+% guy over the last 4 years, close to 30 anyway. If you're buying one or the other, I'm guessing that you're leaning Lopez over Gausman at this point.
100%, yes.
I think that's where I stand as well as a Blue Jay fan, which is a tricky one. But I think we got to call it like we see it here. As much as I'd like to think Gausman can be a Cy Young finalist again, I think that's probably a tricky road for him. Framber Valdez has been on the surface. If you're just looking at ERA, 3.95 is fine. The WHIP is 124, nothing crazy, but the strikeouts are drastically down. He doesn't seem to be quite that same dominant level that we saw last season. He's allowing more hard hits, but the barrel rate is down. It's kind of a weird profile here. Are you interested in buying in on Valdez potentially? I know that maybe the price isn't going to be that low just because the ERA is still good. And I know a lot of people won't really look past the box score, but are there things that tell you that he's going to turn this around and get those strikeouts back up?
I mean, he's Framber Valdez. He's what he is. He drives us nuts because he throws too many sinkers to right-handers, and those things are either going to find gloves or they're going to find grass. And it's just, oh, well, okay. I guess it's a lot of it's today. I mean, his changeup can be a nullifier against right-handers sometimes, and we want it to be the slider or the cutter, but that thing just disappeared. It was really good in the middle of the season last year. Framber Valdez's cutter to right-handers, it got me excited for him, and no, it went away. Look, when you throw this many sinkers over the plate, it's just going to be a volatile experience. And without his curveball being absurdly dominant, as we have seen in the past from him, it's only 53% strike rate this year, not like the 60% of old, then it's going to be a little bit tougher to get the strikeouts that you used to see from him. But I mean, I have him in this tier of like him, Justin Steele, Bailey Ober, who aren't true aces because you don't really expect every night for them to just go out there and be like, yeah, I got this, no problem. I know what I'm going to get. They're just solid. They'll be fine. End of the year, we'll have the same conversation again. No, Framber Valdez is XYZ because we look at the whole season experience. And there's really only been on the ERA side like 3 bad games. So it's strange. It's weird. And you just put him in your lineup and forget about it with Framber Valdez. But it's nothing that I'm going to say like, oh, yeah, there's my ace. All right, let's go. You hear that, Jason Collette? You shouldn't have gone Framber Valdez. You should have gone Cole Reagans. Should have done it.
Oh, I think a lot of us are wishing that at this point. And I will say, Nick, I know I mentioned it before we started recording, but you nailed Cole Reagans. We did a show. We did a show in the preseason where it's not, the story's not fully written yet, but we did a show in the preseason with Eno, and I was the low man on Reagans and you were the high man. And I will have to be tipping my cap to you there because Cole Reagans.
Well, okay. I want to say one thing about that. We've seen the volatility this year from Reagans. And the thing I was praising and really in on was a guy that was a unicorn with 5 pitches last year. It's not really been that until Reagans brings back, I think, the cutter properly, which at the beginning of the year was just not well commanded at all. He wasn't able to get it arm side, or rather glove side, like he used to. He's really just been 4-seamer and changeup lately. And those 2 are great pitches, so it's done well, but the hits are up massively. The whip is much higher than I want it to be because of this. And until the cutter shows up, he's not the unicorn. He's just a 2-pitch guy with some maybe occasional other secondaries, as opposed to the curveball working and the slider being a devastating pitch to lefties and righties, and that cutter just being this all-encompassing anytime pitch. So I hope we'll get there from Cole Reagans, but we will see some up and down with just fastball changeup from him. It's not just like the top 5, stud that I really thought we saw on the end of last year that would be replicated. So, it's a little bit of both, but I'm glad that he's only had 2 actual blow-ups this year. And hopefully that's it for the rest of the year for Cole Reagans.
That's it with him. I mean, if those 2 blow-up starts were just, 3, 4, even 5 earned runs, because they were 7 and 7 respectively, Angels and Baltimore. If those are just 2, 3, because everything else, there's not another start where he's allowed more than 3. And even 3, he's only got to 1 other time. Everything else is 2 or below. Yeah. When he's on, he is about as good as there is right now. Maybe not in that top tier, but I've completely changed my tune on him. And that is because of you. You can't do a podcast talking pitching with Nick without Cole Reagans coming up. But
just watch him. Just watch Cole Reagans, and you know how fun it is. That's all you got to do, guys.
He's really, really good. I think I didn't give him enough credit.
Just watch him.
Maybe it was the Royals thing. Maybe it was just not a significant trade. I didn't think it was that, whatever. But for whatever reason, I doubted him. I am no longer really doubting him. Like you said, it's not been perfect, but it's still been a 30% strikeout rate, 21.5 on the K- walk. Really, he has a 3.21 ERA with the 2 7 earned run blowups.
Yeah.
I really, really like Cole Reagans. And this was the year to get him, because this was the year where he was quote unquote cheap. Next year, we're going to be paying some serious premiums, I would imagine, if things keep up,
Well, it's
even if it's
interesting. I
close.
mean, he was going like 70th overall by the end of it or something like that,
Yeah.
60th, 70th. And when you look at the landscape of pitching, there's a lot of guys who are on the mend right now who won't be next year. It's going to be another year, what do you know, of me feasting on like 70 to 110 because everyone trying to figure out who the exact number 3, number 4 is. Like, I don't know, man. I'll just get whoever falls to me. Because there's going to be so many. I mean, cool. Where do we put Jared Jones next year? What about Paul Skeens? Getting added to that, right? You see Nick Pivetta looking great again today. You see, I mean, there's so many guys that are just looking great. Where's Garrett Crochet going to go on that? Mackenzie Gore. I mean, it's
fun.
There's so many good pitchers.
It's a fun game to play. I'll have to do another show with you at some point. We'll predict ADPs.
Oh man,
it's tricky because you're gonna get like McClanahan's gonna be back next year in the draft pool, and Alcantara and DeGrom, and it's gonna be completely different. And even
oh my gosh, Sandy will be back. Sandy will be back. Maybe I don't know, because he got like Tommy John in like September, right? It was kind of late.
Yeah, he'll be drafted.
McClanahan will be back though. Yes, as I have my giant 20-ounce mug of McClanahan to hold my water. It's wonderful.
We have some great pitchers coming back. Speaking of the Rays, let's talk Zach Eflin, who was one of my darlings coming into the season. I'll admit it. And it has not gone so well for him. Now he's returning today. He has a nice start against the Marlins. And again, I wouldn't read too much into this one way or the other if he dominates or gets blown up or whatever. I think he's supposed to be on a pitch limit. But Zach Eflin, to this point, he actually cut his walk rate, which I find to be hilarious. You have a 3.4% walk rate, and now he's slashed that in half to this point of the season, 1.6. But the strikeouts haven't really been there. We're not seeing the same level of dominance as we did last season from him. Was that just a 1 year, kind of a miracle year for him that we should never expect again? Was he hampered by the injury? What do you think of Eflin? Can he get back to that ace level that we saw in 2023?
Yeah, so that was a fun year, right? I remember having some fun conversations with you about it, I think in Arizona.
Yeah.
And it's hard because you see a guy have that breakout where everything comes together. And traditionally what happens is, for me, when I see a breakout season, what I try and do and say, is this really a foundation that we think is just the plateau, right? And with Eflin, it's not really like one single thing with him. It's the whole amalgamation. And when it's that, it's harder to believe in sustainability, I think. So for Eflin, it was sinker spotting with amazing cutters. This new pitch that he had, it was amazing. Increased curveball usage. This 4-seamer saved in 2 strike counts. The sweeper, all this stuff, like just whoa! He squeezed everything out of it. And by the end, it was a 3.5 ERA. I think he had some bad starts at the end of the year, but that was 3.5 ERA at the end. Also, the fact that he had 31 starts was the most he's thrown in forever. So all that combined was just like, okay, it's going to be worse. How much worse? Obviously, this is not what we thought it would be at 4.12. I still think he's solid. And he's coming back now, which is nice. It's actually, I believe today he's confirmed to start, which is wonderful. I don't think he's an 18% strikeout rate guy. Like I see Eflin as like a decent, like he's a Holly in that same kind of tier of like the Bailey Ober, Valdez Steele area, maybe a little bit lower. But yeah, you should be fine with Zach Eflin. Like I don't think he's a detrimental pitcher as he has been with that 4.12 ERA thus far. So it's all good. He's not going to have a 10 hit per 9. Yeah. That's it. That's all you need to know. Hit per 9 is the most undervalued stat, I think. It's just the quickest reference of like, yeah, we just generally know that guys aren't going to be a 10 plus hit per 9. And we also know that they're not going to be a under 6 hit per 9. Like it's, if you see that number, you just go, great, cool. That will improve. Sweet.
It's one of those stats that is never mentioned, but I've heard you talk about it a few times. I need to look into it more. It does sound like and I think you mentioned it last year with, and this was not even intended as a segue, but Blake Snell, you set it up for me perfectly. Blake Snell had the very low hit per 9. I remember that from another show that we were doing. It has 5.8. It has not been great. It has not been great for Blake Snell, but he's also, another guy we mentioned with Gausman. There's like the slow ramp up. He wasn't signed till late. Now he's been hurt. And he's usually kind of a slow starter to begin with, but he's got a 9.51 ERA through his first 23 outings. The walks have actually, the walk per 9 is higher. The walk percentage is lower. but it has not been good. To put it in layman's terms, Blake Snell has not been good. I heard a quote from Melvin today, the manager, that he's expected to come back after a minimum stint. They don't think this will be something that keeps him out for too long. Is it a good time? I get questions pretty much every day about 10-team leagues. Should I drop Blake Snell?
Yeah, right.
I've been saying no. But the more we get into the season, Blake Snell always thrives in the second half, but he always has those first half. Maybe not always, but he usually looks a lot
does.
better in the second half. But
That is the talking point.
he has those first half reps under his belt, though, where he
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have that this season.
Yeah.
Is that anything that we need to read into, or I don't?
You never know with Blake Snell. This is why, if you remember Arizona, one of my favorite parts was when Eno and I, on our On the Corner segment in Arizona, he came on to argue with me about my ranking of Blake Snell. I had Snell at 33, which was just criminally low, apparently. And at the time it was like relatively. And he was like, no, you can't do this, is this and this and this. And it's like, all right, where do you have it? He goes, 28. I'm like, all right, we're not like that far off. And the reason for it was I didn't want to deal with it. He's one of those guys. That's why I had Hunter Green obnoxiously low, Mitch Keller, which, honestly, I'm regretting a little bit of Green and Keller a touch right now. I mean, Keller's having that run of good command that's not going to last, I don't think, but it is now. But with Snell, he's a hipster, headache-inducing pitcher, stifling the entire roster. At some point it's going to happen. I remember there's a conversation on Twitter once. It was like when he went off, I think in 2021 or 2022 in that second half, maybe it was a 2022. And it was like, I think it was the end of July. I was like, this is why you can't drop Blake Snell. I'm like, yes, it is. You should, if you dropped Blake Snell in April or something in that year, then you would have gotten more 3 months worth of value. And who knows, maybe there's a guy who's benefiting you also at that time that you have now. And I think one of the biggest mistakes I've made in the years with my fantasy teams is holding on too long for guys that are not locks. It's a different thing if it's like, no, this is DeGrom. This is a stud hitter that is just, we know is going to return. It's Blake Snell, and Blake Snell hurts a ton. Even last year, 2023, he was really bad for 2 months, really like first 6 weeks. And he was so good after, and yet he still had a 119 whip for the entire year. Right. Yeah. I mean, think about that. That's a huge deal. Sure. He had 14 wins and he had a massive strikeout rate and a 2.25 ERA. And I'm not saying that it wasn't worthwhile. My point is he always will find a way to kind of make you feel icky. And do you want to put yourself through that? He had to be that good to still have a 119 whip at the end of it. Yeah. I'm all for moving on. If you have things that are going to help you now. If you don't have things that are help you now, if it's just not really much, if it's lateral, don't. It's constantly the conversation is something now is 3 times what's worth something potential later, because the potential thing later is still potential, and also you get less of it than you do now. So that's how I feel. I think also we are in a streaming market at the moment. I'm still able to keep my head above water, which is pretty awesome in the streaming world. So definitely check out the article every day if you need help making those choices. But right now we're getting this extra influx. It happens every single June. We get a lot more young guys coming and getting opportunities. We also see trends happen with some pitchers that others are missing because of the name that they've already crossed off their list. We also get a better understanding of offenses now too. So there's a lot of little things that are helping us pick up more players. And Blake Snell, I don't know, man. Even when he comes back from an injury, you're starting him the first day back from the injury, probably not. So that's another week. It's like, oh gosh, I don't know, man. I don't want to do it. I'm done.
No, that's good analysis though. It really is, because he actively hurts you for good chunks of the season. And another thing is that Blake Snell has only thrown 180 innings twice, and the high outside of those 2 seasons is 129, 128, which he's done a couple times. So we're kind of banking on him, A, returning, B, staying healthy, and C, dominating to get those ratios down, which he has destroyed. He's absolutely destroyed your ratios in the time he's been out there. I think a head-to-head manager will look at it a lot differently than a roto manager, probably. If you're in head-to-head and he's killed you, I think you're going to be more inclined to drop, whereas the roto manager, especially in a deeper league, is probably going to be more inclined to give him time. I don't know if that's correct, though. He's a very tricky player to evaluate, but to your point, pitching is so strong I do a similar kind of starting pitcher chart that Sporer does, and every day it's like, yep, pretty much everybody's a start today except for like 4 guys, 5 guys maybe.
Right.
So it makes it harder with these guys, not just Snell, but all of them who have struggled in a time when pitching has been at a very, very good place when the ball seems to be dead. I tweeted it last night and caused a bit of a storm. Talking about Teoscar Hernandez crushing a ball at a good launch angle at 107 and it doesn't leave the yard. Pitching is king this year. If you're not living up to what everybody else is doing, you're setting yourself back even farther, especially as the weather's going to warm up and the balls are going to be flying more out of parks in the summer. This might get worse before it gets better for Snell. Like, is he going to have a 9.52 ERA? I don't think either of us think it's going to be that bad, but it might not be a point where he's actually helping you this year, which is a tricky realization to come to, but I think I'm starting to get there myself.
Yeah, it's something I think we don't do enough is we just got to move on and accept that like there's this feeling of dropping someone before they get hot and we go, oh no, why did I do that? It's so much worse to hold on something that just kills your season.
I completely
like take
agree.
chances, make mistakes, get messy. It's what I like to say, the Miss Frizzle method.
Yeah,
So,
have some fun. Have some fun. Pick a guy up. Cut a first-round player. No, don't cut first-round players. Don't have that kind of fun. But it is fun to be mixing things up a little bit. Fantasy baseball is a lot of fun, but if you're sticking with your roster from the beginning of the year, I don't think it'll be quite as fun as if you hit on one of those picks. Now, it does suck to drop a guy who, if you dropped him last year in May, you're probably not happy with yourself. But I don't know that this is the same scenario exactly for Blake Snell. He's a tricky one. I think the trickiest player possibly on this list for me is the guy we're going to talk about now. It's Michael King. I don't know when to start him. I don't know when to sit him. Now, I personally don't have any shares. This is more for my writing and my content, but it's not been great for him. I mean, it's a 3.82 ERA, but it's come with great starts against the Dodgers, getting blown up by the Rockies, and much increased walk rate. The strikeouts are down, which you would expect coming from the pen to a full-time starter. But I also worry that Michael King is 30 innings away from his career high, and I'm not sure what the Padres are going to do down the stretch to maybe mitigate some of that. Are you worried? And this is more from a head-to-head standpoint, but like when we get to head-to-head playoffs, I don't think that Michael King is going to be
no, Joe, no.
We're not doing
Joe!
this?
No, Joe! We don't do this! Okay. A week and a half ago, the question I kept getting that I thought was, I hate it. The question, it's always a revolving around the same thing. I have a guy on my team, but here's a hypothetical situation in the future. What are we going to do because of the hypothetical situation?
You're right.
Right? And it was Luis Heel when Garrett Cole comes back. I was like, guys, don't worry about this. Like either something's going to happen or they'll just go a 6-man rotation. Something happened. Right? Right? Like, don't think about this. Again, also 3 times the value now than later. And if you're thinking about head-to-head playoffs, who knows? Maybe it's like a week or so he goes on the IL. It's so rare for a guy to go more than 30 starts this year. Like all the time. Happens all the time. So 180 innings is generally what we expect. And probably something will happen that means that Michael King isn't pitching or still pitching in September. Or maybe they do shut him down. And maybe they do. And that is a very small possibility. But here's the thing, guys. 1, you got to get there first. You gotta be good enough to get to the finals and the playoffs in the first place. Okay. Second, anyone who's ever played a head-to-head league knows it is a crapshoot. Yep. It doesn't matter if you have aces or blanks for your starters in that week. Okay. Sure. Obviously there's a higher chance if you have like the studs, you have Buehler out there, you have Cole out there, whatever it is. We all know, it just happens to be the week that Nola ruined my season, right? Like he would never. But you know what I'm saying is it's just, who knows? Yeah. Who knows what September is going to bring at this point? There's so much focus all the time about Garrett Crochet getting shut down. Oh no, I can't have that on my team. I got to get value. No, get it now. And who knows? Okay. Who knows? And not to mention also, we see it all the time. The studs, they get rested too, because the playoffs are coming for them. Yeah. You know, it's just, there's so much out there. And when it comes to Michael King, the Padres want him to be a full starter. I think it's a very clear situation to them just letting him ride. Okay. And actually looking at the games he's done poorly, you're going to throw away the first one that was in Korea. Okay. Korea. You're going to throw that one away. Okay. Done. Okay. Then you have a 7-walk game. No way is that Michael King. So fine. We move past that. Then it's been 4 bad games against the Dodgers, in Coors, against the Phillies. And then, yes, the one that was very weird and is still weird to this day is Rocky Road. Because I got to tell you, he looked unreal against the Dodgers and things just didn't go his way that one game, right? Everything else makes sense. And then there's just this one weird game, but then he's been great since. And Michael King is great. He is a command pitcher. He is someone that has multiple pitches, a changeup, a sweeper, sinker, all great. He's allowed to go deep into games. He threw 105 pitches in 7 innings against the Royals. That's a really good team. Mm-hmm. Just start Michael King. Stop thinking about all of this. Just start him. He's a Holly. He's a top 40 guy for me. He's got all the things. Don't overthink this with Michael King.
Okay. So generally speaking, when it comes to exceeding your previous career high in innings, do you have some kind of
do it at some point?
What is there a certain number for you? Like, let's say a guy's previous career high is 100. We can't expect 200, right? So what's the number?
108 last year from Jesus Luzardo, for example, right? After it was like 100 before. I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is there's certain players where we think like the innings jumps are massive and they can't do it. And that's usually when they are super young and it's like the Strasburg attention, right? Michael King is not this. Michael King is a efficient quality start machine. And the Padres like, yes, we just lost Musgrove and we lost Darvish. And like, we need this. We're talking about getting another guy on top of Cease from the White Sox now, you know? This is not a situation of like, oh no, he's going to degrade. I also am in the belief of, you just rarely see like 100 to 130 to 150 to 170. It just doesn't work like that anymore. You got George Kirby and Logan Gilbert go out there, do their thing. They've been fine, right? Alek Manoah did it after his first one of 110, 115. Shane McClanahan did it. This is what happens. Now, you could say that Michael King has some sort of injury history before. Maybe. Who knows what injuries are these days? So the way I see it with Michael King is like, the skills are good. The skills are he's a 25% strikeout rate right now with a 3.82 whip, a ERA and a 123 whip. And I'm telling you that he's been worse than who he is thus far. So I'm all for this. I think that he was actually dropped after that Colorado game in one league, and I swooped him up, and I've been so happy. And I hope a lot of you have the same fortune, because I think Michael King is a solid play in 12 teamers everywhere.
Wow, you're definitely higher on him than I am, and maybe I worry too much about, like you said, things that aren't, we don't know what's going to happen in September, and that's a good point. You don't ever think about heading off any of that trouble down the line with the sell highs? It sounds like you're not a big sell high guy in that.
I mean, I'm a sell high guy if I think the skills aren't there, but it's like, it's too big brain.
Yeah.
We're guys, take the value. Just take it. You have the thing. Don't try and squeeze the most out of it. You have a thing that's working and is good for you. Just go with it.
That's totally fair.
I can't express that enough. And not to mention, yes, in September of every year, there are surprises that are good still, all the time.
That's true.
We never stop that burn and churn. So don't worry. There will be backups if you need them. Just go with the thing that's helping you out now. You need to get to the playoffs. Get there.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you can't worry about this if your team is like, struggling to get
10-0 right now.
If you're 10-0 right now, maybe you start thinking about it.
Sure, if you want to, but
Nick is telling you
make sure that you get something that you feel is an upgrade elsewhere or something like that. Fine, but I can't emphasize enough. I think watch Michael King just pitch through the year. It's fine.
No, I think that's a really good. Really good way of putting it, because I think maybe I've gotten too caught up in that this year with the Skeenses and the Joneses and the Crochets, the guys you mentioned, and worrying too much about what's going to happen down the stretch. Definitely something that I'll be thinking about more going forward. Just living in the moment, essentially. Living in the moment.
Exactly. 3 times. Think about it that way. 3 times is valuable now. Okay, cool.
I agree. I think you've got me on board there.
Yes.
Let's talk Walker Buehler. who is
Oh
somebody
boy.
that I was in love with probably 3-4 years ago. I thought that this guy was going to win multiple Cy Youngs. Maybe he still can. He's had a bit of a tricky road. It hasn't looked like old Walker Buehler in what we've seen so far this year. He almost looks like the same Walker Buehler that was coming out in early 2022. Just statistically, I mean, you're much better at breaking down the pitches and the individual characteristics of it. Just if you look at the stats, what he's doing now, what he was doing pre-injury in 2022, looks like about the same guy. Does he maybe just need a little bit of ramp up time to fully get back to Walker Buehler, or is there no more old Walker Buehler? Is it just a new Walker Buehler at this point?
Well, he doesn't know who he is, so I don't know. He's lost. His stuff is great. He just doesn't know what his approach is. And I'm just like, dude, just aim for the top middle of the zone with everything, and then you'll be fine. They're like a lot of guys. I just want them to do that. Tyler McGill will do that too. But no, Walker Buehler has a good cutter, has a good fastball, has a good curveball, a good slider. Like he does all the good things. He's trying to nibble too much and then throwing too much in the middle of the zone and then going over here, then going over there. It's like, dude, just simplify everything. You're fine. Let your stuff do the work. And Buehler should be fine. So I think also being on the Dodgers and Walker Buehler being Walker Buehler, like this will iron itself out over time. That's simple.
Do you think he'll get back to the same peaks we saw before?
No, because he doesn't have sticky stuff to help him get the absurd IVB that he got on his fastballs. It was like, I think we had like 6 PLV on those 4-seamers from back then, which is just stupid. He doesn't have that anymore because he doesn't have sticky stuff. Well, but still should be an ace. Like he should be able to go 6 innings plus constantly for a winning ball club with good ratios and a strong strikeout rate. Like that's what he should be. I think it's just taking some time for him to really figure out his groove.
Do you believe in that post Tommy John kind of grace period? We saw it with Verlander at full display a couple of years ago, like the 300, 400
Well,
innings.
it's funny. It was the Tommy John honeymoon. Kind of, yeah. Especially considering that we see that everyone's elbows is busting. I mean, sure, you just saw like John Means has to get it again, which is just so unfortunate.
Awful.
But like, I don't know. I trust the health of the guy who just got the surgery as opposed to the guys who are waiting too long. It's kind of funny now.
That's totally
like
fair.
The guys coming off of Tommy John next year, like Shane McClanahan. I'm so in.
Yeah.
Let's go. He just got the surgery. Sandy Alcantara, let's go. He's gonna feel so great next year. Luis Steele's looking amazing. That's kind of where my head is at the moment. It's really funny how that just keeps turning. And it's actually interesting. I remember back in 2021, I was more in on Corey Kluber and Jameson Time. Maybe it was 20. Yeah, I think it was 2021. Than I should have been. And it's because those guys weren't the elites. They were too distant, I think, away from their potential at that point. But for those guys that are actually like studs, yeah, no, you should be buying into the guys, I think, that just got Tommy John because they're ready to go.
Jacob deGrom is also going to be coming back. I wonder what he's going to look like next year. Some people will take him if he comes back and he looks good for a few starts. He's going to go the first round next year. He's going to go.
So I've been talking to some people about him, and I, from a couple of people, they were mentioning that they don't really trust like how deGrom takes care of himself.
Oh, okay.
Which I found very interesting and also not surprising because of other stories of just, he's not the nicest dude. So I get it of like, he's just so good and he's just like, I'm amazing. And he doesn't do all the work after that, but I don't know. He might be. I mean, I hope that we see him later this year. I mean, it's so fun watching deGrom pitch. It's absolutely dumb.
Yeah, it's like Shaq. It's like Shaq in the NBA. Everybody said Shaquille O'Neal never even practiced, didn't do any of this stuff. He was an MVP, a Finals MVP, champion, all this stuff, and he didn't even really try. From everything we've heard, maybe it's the same thing.
So massive.
Some guys are just naturally gifted or naturally 7'3". But let's talk about Jordan Montgomery, who.
Oh, do we have to?
I guess we don't have to, but man,
he's a Toby. He's always been a Toby. He had an amazing October because he's a neckbeard. And neckbeard are guys that don't go down the middle where their face is; they go around it, and they try to nibble the edges as much as they can. They're a neckbeard, and I mean, obviously, Dallas Keuchel popularized this, so it's right there in front of you. Yeah, he's not that good. He never was this good. And it's not this bad at 5.48 ERA, 156 whip. He's not this 14% K rate. He's still a Toby to me. It's just one of those cases of like, okay, it hasn't been good yet, really. But like, just keep playing the matchups. He's fine. There's not really too much more to it than that. Maybe he is going through something else that's really dragging this all down. He's going to likely find another groove just like he did in October last year and be better. But honestly, you can drop him if you want for a streamer or something. Like, what is the ceiling that you're chasing for Jordan Montgomery? That ridiculous month where he got traded to the Cardinals and was upset at the Yankees. Okay, great. Wonderful. What in August? That was a long time ago.
Yeah, even when he gets back to what he gets back to, you're not looking at a lot of strikeouts. You're looking at decent enough team context. I mean, Arizona went to the World Series last year, but I don't think that they're a team that's going to pump wins out of them. I think he's fine, but I think I agree with you. 10, 12 team leagues, especially with the strength of pitching, I just don't know that he's really worth it. Maybe like a situational guy where you leave him on the bench for certain tough matchups, but
he's a Toby. In 12 teamers, you don't need a horde Tobys.
Yeah.
Just move on.
I had him on a team last year that went to the final in my head-to-head home league, and it was one of those like just kind of miracles for him, like a 3.20 ERA. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. Now, he doesn't really strike out batters as much as he used to. He used to be like a 24, 26% guy. Recently, it's like 21%. Probably gets back to league average, but fairly boring. Like if you're in a 15 teamer, if you play in the NFBC, you can't be dropping him probably because there's just nobody to drop him for. But I think in a lot of cases, you guys are playing 10s and 12s, and there are plenty of options to be dropping him for. Nick, I want to ask you about one more guy before I get you out of here. That's Reid Detmers. He started the year off looking like Randy Johnson, and then it all fell apart for him pretty damn quick. And now he's in the minors. I did not expect him to be sent down to AAA. What's going to happen here? Is he coming back soon? Do you think? Is this time? Like, does he need to rework his pitch mix? Give us the laydown on Reid Detmers.
I mean, you shouldn't have to think about Reid Detmers right now in your 12 teamers. There's nothing to do. Just let him be on the wire. It's that simple. 15 teamers, I wouldn't either because that's a roster spot that's incredibly valuable right now. With Reid Detmers, look, he went down to the minors before. What did he do? He learned his slider again. The problem is that they fired that coach.
Of course they did.
So I don't know. I mean, this is always the cycle with Detmers. It's actually really funny. I said this exact thing this year in spring training during my Plus Pitch podcast. I was like, guys, Detmers does this every year. He showcases that he has a really good slider down and in all of a sudden for like a couple games. And this year was even more exciting because he increased his vert on his four-seamer. And he had these amazing 3 starts because of it, even though the command was weird. And then all of a sudden, the command got even weirder. And it was bad and has been bad for a bit. And it stinks because I really want Reid Detmers to be good. I just want him to be traded. Can someone please trade for Reid Detmers and get him away from Los Angeles? Don't be the Dodgers, just anyone else.
We need to disband the Angels. We need to just disband them, move them to Montreal, get the Expos back, or do something. Because it's pretty bad. When Reid Detmers does come back, because I don't imagine he'll spend the next 4 months in AAA. When we get that tweet from Underdog or whoever, Reid Detmers will be starting tomorrow. He's called back up. You gonna pick him up? You gonna take a shot on him? No. Speculative ad?
Nah, I'm good. It's a cherry bomb. I mean, even if it's good for like 3 starts or something, that 4 starts, it's not gonna last. And I don't know when it's gonna. I don't buy into Reid Detmers getting fixed by the Angels.
That's fair. Long term, let's say he does get traded. Is the ceiling for him like an 8?
Well, then we're pretty good because then if you can figure out how to sustain the command in any way of like, hey, cool, this is where my slider goes all the time, and this is the changeup going down here properly, and 4-seamer stays up here. Like he needs those 3, the Imperial Shuttle, as Fast would call it. Yeah, that is legit, and I would be in if it's a good organization. If it's not a good organization, then I'd be out.
Let's hope he goes somewhere because I think the raw talent is really, really good, and the Angels are just good at breaking things. They've been good at breaking things for a while. I mean, if you just look at the
hearts of their fans.
If you look at the last 10 or 12 years, like every player that, like even like Pujols signing, Hamilton, Rendon, nothing's worked out for them, even though they had half of the last 10 American League MVPs. It must be tricky to be an Angels fan. But it's not tricky to talk with Nick Pollack. It is always a great time to have him on the new show. First time on the new show. Of course, he was on the old podcast several times. But Nick, it's great to christen you here on 90 Feet From Home. Fantastic getting to catch up with you, man.
Absolutely. And of course, if you guys are listening right now, do Joe a solid here. Put so much time into this podcast. Go rate and review it on iTunes. It means a lot. It does a ton for new shows. So I definitely go and take the time to do that.
You guys have been fantastic with that so far. Please do listen to what Nick is saying. Hit that 5-star button, hit the rating, the review, whatever you're doing to help the show grow in the algorithm. However the algorithm works, I know that if you like and subscribe and do all that stuff, it does help out. Nick hates plugging his stuff, so I will do it for him. He is one of the best pitching minds in the industry. You need to be following him on Twitter at PitcherList, keeping up with everything that PitcherList is doing. The podcast, there is a podcast like every 10 minutes from PitcherList. There's always something in the feed. There are always articles on the site for you guys to be checking out. And incredible staff. Just, I can't say enough about Nick and everything that PitcherList does. So you need to be keeping up with him. If you want to follow along with what I'm doing, Joe Orico99 is the Twitter feed. You get all the different updates from Fantasy Pro stuff and tweets and podcasts and all that great work. But we'll be back again tomorrow, kind of wrapping up the week. And tomorrow is Thursday, so we will not be wrapping up the week. We'll be talking about Wednesday's slate. But until then, everybody, take care and have a great night.